Morning, sisters. Or afternoon if you're in Europe, I guess. One second. Alrighty. So, if you're European and you've been awake for a few hours, you've probably already seen it. I just saw it like 20 minutes ago. The New York Times has reported. Hello, Commentatio. Hello, all the Guines. So, yeah. Yes, the Vosh, and JK thing is very stupid. Like, I don't want to talk about it. It's too stupid. Okay. So, the New York Times, hello, Blood Moon, has reported on the cast review. So we're going to read the New York Times article. I have 50 minutes until I need to end this stream and I need to go to work. Like usually my work starts at 5:30 in the morning and today doesn't start till 9:45. So I woke up at like 6:30 and I'm like, what am I supposed to be doing with myself? Okay. And there's a picture of the lovely Keira Bell. We should have her on the channel sometime. Okay. Tavistock Gender Clinic not safe for children report finds. England's only specialist service for young people who identify as transgender is criticized in an NHS report. Then there's the photo of Keira Bell, and underneath it says, Keira Bell, former Tavistock patient, began taking puberty blockers at 16 and by 20 had undergone a double mastectomy. She now regrets transition and lives as a lesbian woman. Okay. This is written by, it doesn't say, because this is an archive link. Why isn't the author listed here? Oh, yeah, Lucy Bannerman, who is obviously from the UK. She usually writes for the Sunday Times in the UK, I think, unless I'm confusing her with someone else. All right. Okay. The Tavistock Clinic faces a complete overhaul after review found that its gender identity services are quote unquote not not a safe or viable long term option for children and young people. Izzy, that's amazing. That is really good. I hope you and your girlfriend can like actually fucking get real therapy and get help now. That's great. I'm very happy for you guys and for the other women in that group. Okay. The report has been hailed as a victory for whistleblowers who warned that the Gender Identity Development Service, GIDS, clinic in North London was operating outside the typical NHS safeguarding and clinical standards. Dr. Hilary Cass, a retired pediatrician, was commissioned by NHS England to investigate services at the clinic, which had been sending children as young as 10 for experimental hormone treatment. Okay. But is it even experimental if they're not really keeping data? Because remember when the first judicial review happened, when Keira Bell took them to court and they were like, show us your data, show us your numbers. And they were like, we can't really show you our numbers because we don't actually keep track of what the fuck is going on. So is it even experimental if no one is keeping track of anything? Okay. Hello, Hal. Okay. Um, right. The clinic, run by Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust, is England's only specialist service for children and young people who identify as transgender. It has been overwhelmed by a sudden increase in referrals from across the country, particularly among girls who are distressed about their gender and youngsters on the autism spectrum. In 2009, the clinic received about 50 referrals, typically from males who had suffered gender dysphoria from an early age. By 2020, there were 2,500 referrals, mostly from females who started suffering gender identity issues in their early teens, with a further 4,600 young people on the wait list. I'm not really commenting because this is like things we already know and it's not really things to be commented on. Okay. About 1/3 of children and young people referred to GIDS have autism and other types of neurodiversity, while there is also an overrepresentation of quote unquote looked after children in local authority homes or foster care. Yes. I'm so glad they mentioned that. But like all the foster kids, all the really traumatized kids who have like very shitty family network and support and that kind of thing, all of them are like, I'm non binary. What the fuck is that? Obviously, it's not normal. Obviously, it doesn't mean they're actually all going to be happy with surgery. Okay. It has also lost many senior staff who have clashed with the leadership over the best way to treat vulnerable young people with complex histories who are requesting experimental hormone therapies to change gender. The long-term outcomes of such therapies at this age group are still unknown. Yeah. So I have a really old video, like a 2 or 3 year old video. Um, that is me talking about yeah, there was the Sunday Times. It might have actually been Lucy Bannerman. I can't remember. Pretty actually, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was Lucy Bannerman. Was writing about how there was like 35 clinicians who left the Tavistock within like 1 year or two, no, within 3 years, whatever. It was like a very short period of time, and it was like most of their clinical staff. Like the turnover was insane. And then like a handful of them like actually went to journalists and spoke and were like, yeah, they're transing the gay kids and like we are not allowed to like raise safeguarding concerns that this kid might not be a good candidate and like all this shit. So that's what they're referring to. Like it's like a huge, it's not like a handful, it's like a huge amount of them have left because once they're actually working there, they realize like this is really fucked up. Okay. Critics have accused the clinic of abandoning NHS best practice in its alleged readiness to offer life changing medical treatments to children who declare themselves transgender. And I love how they say that children who declare themselves transgender. I don't know why I keep saying they, she, Lucy Bannerman. Okay. Because that's how it works in Canada too. Like, literally, the kid declares themselves trans. And then when they go to the doctor or the therapy or whatever it is that they actually end up going to, it's literally just like, are you capable of consenting? And do you want the hormones? Okay. That's all it is. There's no like, what is your dysphoria? Like, why do you think you're trans? None of that. Just, oh, you think you want hormones because you say that you're trans? Okay. Are you capable of consenting to the hormones? Okay. It's like they're saying here. Okay. Cass concluded that a quote fundamentally different service model is needed end quote in an interim report released yesterday. Her report calls for the end of the clinic's current monopoly over treatment of young people wishing to change gender. She recommended that treatment be redistributed to regional hubs across the country to reduce the burden on the North London clinic and to ensure that young people in crisis are seen more quickly by a broader range of health professionals. Yes. So if your kid is suicidal and saying they're trans, running to the gender clinician so they can like sit down with them and be like, "Yes, you're trans." Is that really going to help their suicidal ideation at that exact moment? No. You need a fucking psychiatrist or something, psychologist or something, not a gender clinician. You need somebody who's going to take your suicide fucking seriously and actually treat you like a normal human being. Okay. Very fucking much agree with this. I don't know if any of you guys read that Lorelai Twitter thread um um about this, but it was very insightful. Anyway, okay. And they mentioned in the interim review that's been published, they mention like these kids need other kinds of support. It's not just like transition. They literally, what was the term they used? Like other mental health needs are overlooked once transition is like on the table or something like that. Okay. She, which this is the Dr. Cass, who the retired pediatrician who's heading up the review, recommended that treatment is redistributed. Oh, we already read this. Okay. Then there's the picture of the Tavistock that's on like every fucking article about the Tavistock. Okay. Cass said that GID's lack of consistent data collection meant that not enough is known about the service users or their outcomes to justify the current approach to treatment. Exactly. And this is what they found in the judicial review. You guys remember this? The judge was very angry at the Tavistock people because they were like, "Oh, well, we need to do it this way because like it helps their mental health." And he was like, "Okay, so like show me the papers that like show me the data that you guys can prove that you see that within your patient groups." And they were like, "Well, we don't really keep data." So he was like, "So you're basically just saying you think it helps them and you don't actually know if it helps them, and that's why you need to keep doing what you're doing?" Yeah. Um, she also found the treatment of young people identifying as transgender had somehow escaped the quote unquote normal quality controls. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Quote, because the specialist service has evolved rapidly and organically in response to demand, the clinical approach and overall service design has not been subjected to some of the normal quality controls that are typically applied when new or innovative treatments are introduced, end quote, the review said. Yeah, but listen to this. The service has evolved rapidly and organically in response to demand. Like plastic surgery, where somebody shows up and say, "I want this," and you give it to them. Yeah, that's not how you fucking treat children in medicine. Jesus Christ. Thank you for fucking noticing someone. Okay. Yeah. The report concluded, quote, a fundamentally different service model is needed, which is more in line with other pediatric provision to provide timely and appropriate care for children and young people needing support around their gender identity. This must include support for any other clinical presentations they may have. It is essential that these children and young people can access the same level of psychological and social support as any other child or young person in distress from their first encounter with the NHS and at every level within the service. End quote. Exactly this, exactly fucking this. The kids come in, they're autistic, they have depression, they have anxiety, they have familial crap going on. Oh, I'm trans. Okay, we're going to give you hormones and then we're going to see you once a year. Good luck with that. That is literally how the NHS operates right now in kids. Literally, that's how it operates. Um, and we know from the data that what actually helps suicide rates, which are not crazy high, like the suicide rates of gender dysphoric, whatever the fuck that word means, kids, is like comparable to any other mental health issue. So it's not like they're in some insane high risk group, right? But we know from data that like the support that helps them with their mental health is not affirmation, it's just like actual support, like going to therapy, having like familial, like positive familial connections, things like this. This is what actually helps the suicide rate, not transition. So, like she's saying, they need um a holistic approach to their mental health and their health. They need to be treated like any other. Like this is what I've been saying for fucking years. How is it all trans health, the poor trans people? And so while you're ranting about how trans people need whatever the fuck they want, what you're actually saying is that they deserve medical care that is way outside the standard protocols of medical care. Like they don't deserve to be treated like humans. They like remember we were reading that article the other day about in the last I think it was in the last Matchbox. It's something along the lines of like if you have like a really high BMI, most surgeons don't want to give you a radical double mastectomy, right? For like obvious fucking reasons. Because like when you are very, very large, the chances of coming out of anesthesia are bad. Your healing is like slightly worse. Also, just for like if you're large, there's a lot of stuff that can shift around after the surgery. It's not gonna, there's really bad, like high chances that it's gonna look strange after, like higher chance of stroke, whatever. And then the people are like, well, if you have like a really high BMI and a surgeon thinks it's like unsafe or like a bad idea to operate on you, just shop around for a better surgeon. So the surgeon has this protocol because they don't want to fucking kill you. And you're like, you know what? Trans people's lives don't matter. We should all go get that surgery, even if it's gonna fucking kill us. Like, it's not normal. You deserve to be treated like any other patient because your life fucking matters. Okay, let's keep going. Cass prefaced her report with a letter to young people. She said, quote, I have heard that young service users are particularly worried that I will suggest services will be reduced or stopped. I want to assure you that this is absolutely not the case. The reverse is true. I think that more services are needed for you closer to where you live. End quote. Because everybody is like, the TRAs are scaremongering, right? Especially after what happened in Texas. Everybody is like, they're gonna ban all the hormones. And they're gonna like, you know, prosecute the doctors and prosecute the parents and whatever the fuck they're saying these days. Okay. So, if you're like a small child or, under 16 or whatever, and you've been told your whole life that this is what you need to be happy and without this you're going to kill yourself and blah 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 blah. Well, obviously this is like you will feel like this is an existential threat because you're brainwashed, right? When they tell you that this might be taken away. I am very happy with the cast review because to me so far, like this is the interim report, it's not even done yet. So far, um she is like, yes, you need lots of services. Services that are not, yes, you're trans. You need actual mental health services. And I fucking agree with that. Okay. Critics of the clinic have said that rapidly changing social attitudes to transgender identity have led it to operate beyond the usual safeguarding standards that apply to every other part of the health service. Kate Grimes, a retired hospital manager, said she felt, quote, relief that finally the NHS is looking at this seriously, relief for the patients currently being harmed, relief for the staff who have felt unable to speak out, and hopeful that we can now start to get a proper service model in place, and that we can reintroduce the basic quality of care for patients using evidence, gathering data, listening to staff. End quote. Yeah. All right. Grimes, who has written publicly about her concerns about JID, expressed regret that, quote, it had been left for so long and had got to the point of patients taking legal cases and whistleblowers going to court before the review was finally commissioned to tell us something that the NHS should have known and been looking at for years now. End quote. Yeah. Because there wasn't just Keira Bell. There's also there was like a nurse and wasn't it also Marcus Evans, or is it Marcus Evans? There's at least, oh, and there was also, what was that? Christy, what's her face? She lives in like South America somewhere. There's two different like actual psychologists who've left um GIDS, who've, like, I know Marcus Evans. I'm pretty sure that's him, unless I'm confusing him with someone. Is it Peter Bell or whatever? At least one of them, there's the guy, has written for like Quillette and has been interviewed by like the Times and shit like that. The other one, Christy, whatever her face is, um, she was just, I don't know where she is now. I actually haven't seen her in a couple months now that I think about it, but she was just on the internet talking about it a lot. So like there have been several staff, and like that nurse, she like testified in the Keira Bell case, unless I'm confusing her with someone else. But, like, there are several staff now who are like, I don't need to just not work here. I need to like do something about the fact that this shit is crazy. Okay. And yeah, she's like, it's insane that it should be obvious that this is nuts, but that we're waiting until the patients are like permanently fucked up and they're taking legal cases to court. That's the point at which we're willing to look at the problem, once the patients have already been hurt. That is fucking nuts. Okay. Dr. Anna Hutchinson, a clinical psychologist who left GIDS among concerns that young people were being sent for life changing hormone treatments without adequate investigation of other factors that may be the cause of their identity crises, welcome the calls for, quote, better standards of care for gender questioning and trans identifying young people, which we can all agree is necessary, end quote. The report, she said, quote, reminds clinicians that supporting young people's experiencing distress with their gender is everybody's business, not just that of specialist practitioners, end quote. Exactly. Exactly. Can you imagine being a GP, like a family doctor or whatever, in the UK? And you've been treating this kid since they were a baby. You're the doctor of their parents, like the whole family, right? And the kid comes in one day. Um, hey Dragon Fox. The kid comes in one day and is like, "Oh, I have like a gender feels, so I want to like chop off parts of my body. Can you send me to the clinic?" Imagine being that GP. You don't want to send them to the clinic, but there's literally nowhere else for you to send them. That's literally the only option you have when the kid says, "I have gender feels." And you know that this is what's happening over there. Imagine being that GP. Like, she's right. It's the interest of all people, not just the ones who work there. Even like school teachers. I mean, whatever. We could talk about that part for hours. That it's like the whole society needs to be fucking paying attention and caring about what the fuck's going on with kids. All right. The report, she said, this is still Anna Hutchinson that is speaking. Quote, reminds clinicians that supporting young people experiencing distress with their gender is, oh wait, we already read it. Okay. A JID spokeswoman said, quote, the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust welcomes the focus of Dr. Cass and her team on increasing and broadening the care and support available for this group of patients who are currently waiting far too long, and on developing the evidence base. We will work with her and NHS England to support her recommendations. End quote. Okay. This is so funny to me because, oh God, what's her name? What is the name of the woman who is like in charge? She's like the director or something of GIDS. Just, I remember seeing her. I think it was on Newsnight. Um, and basically they were like, so there's been like this huge increase Uh, in Oh, it was in that one where remember Debbie the detransitioner and Charlie were being interviewed by the BBC. They did like a whole like 40-minute piece on or something on this, and they tried to like interview the Gids people to get like both sides. I think that's what I'm talking about, but I can't remember exactly what I'm talking about. Anyway, the person who was in charge of Gids literally was like, "Yeah, we don't have evidence for this, but like we have to help them because this is what they want." And the reporter was like, "So you're telling me you guys don't have the evidence base cuz like um I don't know." So they basically were like happy to be acting in a lack of information is what I got from that interview. And then here they're like, "Yeah, we're waiting for like the evolution of the evidence base cuz that'll help us." And I'm like, you realize how bad it looks now. You have like a PR person writing this shit instead of getting your whack jobs to rep- to answer. Okay, whatever. Okay, the cast review is expected to make a formal recommendation at a later date. There's another picture of Keira Bell. Says I was really struggling with puberty and my sexuality. When Keira Bell was 14, she says she was, quote, really struggling with puberty and my sexuality, end quote, and, quote, had no one to talk these things through with, end quote. She told the Women's Place UK website, quote, when I stumbled upon transsexualism, that was me. I was meant to be a boy. It made absolute sense to me, and I related so strongly to those women online that had started to undergo medical transition. I felt that I needed to start with medical transition as soon as possible in order to achieve my happiness, end quote. She went to the Tavistock and Portman Clinic and was put on a pathway to that end. She says initial consultations were superficial and did not discuss her sexuality, describing, quote, very general surface level stuff. What is your preferred name? Sorry. Okay. Sorry. Well, okay. Um I set like 10 billion alarms because I'm very bad at waking up. Okay. Um yes. Very general surface level stuff. What is your preferred name? Do you want to transition? End quote. Yeah. So it's like we were always saying, when you get to the gender clinic, they're just like, how do you feel? So you want to transition? Okay. That's it. That's the assessment. Oh, you have a preferred name already? So you're already trans. What am I supposed to do about it? We'll just get you hormones. Oh, you've already socially transitioned? Okay, so you don't need support for that. So what you need now is the hormones. Okay. At 16, she began taking puberty blockers and by the age of 20 had undergone a double mastectomy. But she now regrets that transition and lives as a lesbian woman. Aged 23, she began pursuing a judicial review of the NHS trust. She now argues children going to the clinic should not be treated under a quote unquote affirmation model. The High Court initially ruled in her favor, deciding the teenagers could not give consent to transition. The Court of Appeal overturned that ruling in September. Bell said at the time that she intended to pursue it further and would seek leave to appeal to the Supreme Court. Oh my gosh. The comments of this article have been turned off. That's the end of it. That's the end of it. So I think that the Lucy Bannerman was trying to set up like this is what the cast review was saying, and then being like, look, Keira Bell brought them to court, and everything she said proves what the cast review is talking about. Um, a lot of when the Keira Bell case was overturned, right? Everybody was like, "This is the end." Like their whole thing was a wait. No, it is a huge fucking deal, and like when you have to consider like what how big the institutional support for affirmation only is, it's kind of a given that some of this stuff isn't going to go our way in the beginning. Like to me, this is like the beginning of like the judicial and medical policy. Like I don't even know if overhaul is the right word, but like right now we are like on like the tipping point that things are about to change. I feel so like this is just the beginning, at least from where I'm sitting. Um, okay. Dragon says, why would they put a 15-year-old on puberty blockers? She would have already been through it. Okay, so the point of puberty blockers when you are that after puberty. Okay, so a lot of the times, um, the whole thing is really fucked up. The teens know what testosterone does, right? And a lot of the times they're like it's like really hardcore. Like within the first month of getting on it, like your clitoris hurts because it's growing. you keep getting, it sounds like you keep getting a cold because your voice box is getting bigger. Like, you are like really hungry, you sleep a lot, like you're really horny. Like people know what tea does, right? And so, from where I'm sitting, this is a lot of the time what's happening. You have a teenager who goes to the clinic and is like, I'm a trans and I don't want to be womanly. And they're like, the teenager or the doctor are like, testosterone is like kind of serious. Or the teenager, a lot of the times, knows, like, I think testosterone would be too much of a shock to me, but I don't want to have my like womanhood anymore. So, really, like most of the teenagers that I knew who went on Lupron, they literally were like, I don't want to have my period and I want less estrogen in my body. I don't want to feel like a woman. I don't want to be like womanly. So, it's like the puberty blockers are a way of like taking away some of the womanly stuff, right? Before you add the masculinizing stuff. And it's sold as like this is like like you can like experiment with your gender. This is like reversible. Like they're kind of like this can be like your first step if you're not super sure, because puberty blockers are not the same thing as testosterone. That's reversible. That's like you can just experiment with your gender, right? That's like the pause button. Remember that's how they sell it. Um, so yeah, like I knew a 15-year-old who went on puberty blockers, and she actually had uncontrolled bleeding instead of stopping her period. She had like women with PCOS how they'll have like a period for a month, like 3 months. She had like that after she got her Lupron shot, and she was like, "Well, this is what I need to feel better, so I'm not going to tell the doctors what's happening because then they'll stop giving it to me." This is the level of like self-preservation these people have. They don't give a shit about their self because they are brainwashed. Anyway, but yeah, that's why they put them on puberty blockers first a lot of the time. Um, there's like a whole subgroup of trans identifying females who are on testosterone for like less than 6 months, less than 5 months, because they go on testosterone for like a couple, like 2 or 3 months, and it is like so psychologically like overwhelming. It is so like physiologically like a shock. Like I literally know a trans identifying female who is she's Sri Lankan. She's like a very very petite build, like very very small. Like she can't even shop in like the adult section because she's very tiny, okay? And well, at least in Canada. And so she first had her double mastectomy, right? Which honestly was kind of pointless because she had like double A's or something. Then she was like, "Oh, I'm gonna go on my testosterone now to like become a man or whatever," right? She was on T for like 1 month because it was like so like viscerally upsetting to her what was happening to her body on the testosterone. She couldn't handle it and she had to stop. This is after she had her tits chopped off and after she was like, "Yeah, I'm a man" for years, right? So I think some because there is like these people now, especially with like the sheer quantity of females transitioning, right? There are, I think, quite a few teenagers who think like, "Oh, I need to like start." Oh yeah, I know it's 6:30 for you guys over there. I was actually thinking like people in the Pacific Standard Time must be like WTF that I'm streaming at like 5 in the morning. I started streaming at 8 here, but I know for the Europeans that's like 3 p.m. or I can't do math, 1 p.m. or something. So I was like, whatever, the Europeans will be awake. Um, yeah. Anybody have any other questions? Because I kind of got through this way faster than I thought I would. Maybe I'll talk about the Lorelei thread. Oh, or no, who's that scientist woman? Setterblom. Yes. Okay. Actually, I need to eat a bit here. Okay. Dragon and Radical, why are you awake at 6:30 in the morning? Um, Dragon Fox, are you in the US though? Like I know you're in that time zone, but you're in the US, right? Okay. Okay. The JL Setterblom thread is very good, but it is very long. So I think we're going to read the Lorelei thread next. Unless you guys have questions and things, then we can just talk about that crap instead. I have another 20 minutes until I have to stop. I need to be at work in like an hour. So if I stop in 20 minutes, that gives me like 45 minutes to get to work, and it's like 15 minutes away. Okay. Um, Dragon says, I had a friend who tried estrogen and the side effect made him crazy. I can imagine the testes would make a girl aggressive and angry. Yeah, I don't know if it's so much like aggressive, because really the way I see it, like obviously like roid rage is a thing that happens, but I don't think that's like the general experience of being on T. I think more of what it is like just, and this is obviously from like my like talking with women who've been on T. Like maybe we can talk about this with Rachel tomorrow, or no, that's today. Maybe we can talk. Oh yeah, that's like in 12 hours. Maybe we can talk about this with Rachel tonight. Um, Puberty blockers are actually hormones too. I don't think so. I thought that they bind with the hormones and like prevent them from like being created more. That's why I actually, people are always like, oh, they put them on hormones, they put them on blockers. Like blockers is not really hormones, I thought. I thought it was like an antagonist that prevents hormones. Anyway, what I right, the T. I don't think it really makes them aggressive so much as it turns off like all their feelings. Like it makes their feelings like 2D. And then like from a lot of the TIFs or D-trans women I've talked to who've been on T, they're like, I I could only feel like anger or like lust, and like all my other feelings were gone. So they were like 90% of the time I had like no feelings. Going on a trip to an antagonist. Yeah. Yeah. The GnRHA inhibitors. Yeah, exactly. Um and yeah, so it's not so much that they're like very aggressive as that might be one of the very few emotions they actually express, if I'm making sense. And I don't like, obviously there are tiffs just like the men's, kind of. And I am very, very critical of these people. No, if this is not directed at you, Dragon, who are like, a woman who's been on testosterone know what it feels like to be a man. No. A woman on testosterone doesn't know what it's like to be a man, just like a man on estrogen doesn't know fucking clue what it's like to be a woman. Like, a woman's experience of a male level of testosterone is obviously radically different because the way our physiology like processes it and interprets it is radically different. Um, I also think like it has such a huge negative effect on women that it's kind of like excusing men to be like, oh, well, the men must be like that all the time, the poor men. No, the way it affects women, I think, is like way worse than the way it affects men. Um, yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. Oh no, this is not it. Okay, I found it. I'm sure the JL Setterblom one is like really good because she's very like data and fact based, but it was really long for this morning. Okay. I know I was muted. My bad. Okay. This is the thread I am now reading. So you can retweet it or follow along or screen cap it or whatever you want to do. Okay. So I'm not going to read like everything. I'm going to go and look for the things that are not covered in the article because there's a couple things not covered in the article that I thought were interesting. Okay. So the first thing Lorelai says is that she is cautiously optimistic that this is going to be a good thing. I'm on the same page. I'm cautiously optimistic. Okay. So she says, in the summary, we already have extremely valuable observations, an acknowledgement of the vast increase in referrals and the consequent wait times and growing concerns of how the NHS should treat these children, as well as the statement that, quote, the clinical approach has not been subjected to some of the usual control measures that are typically applied when new or innovative treatments are introduced. Many of the challenges and knowledge gaps we face in the UK are echoed internationally, and there are significant gaps in the research and evidence base. End quote. She says they're whistling in the dark, as my granddad used to say. The summary adds that definitive advice on the use of puberty blockers or feminizing or masculinizing hormones cannot be made yet because of the gaps in evidence base, but the research will continue so recommendations can be made in the future. Okay, so you know how fuck, is it France or Sweden? I think this is Sweden. That basically was like, we're not giving puberty blockers to anyone outside of like a clinical experiment. What they mean is like a university is running a study, a hospital is running a study, and you have been like selected to take part in the study. Not you went to the doctor and they put you on hormones and they're experimental, so that's an experiment. No, no, no. Like you are in an actual clinical study. That is the only way you will be put on puberty blockers. I think in Sweden. It's very possible I'm confusing this with France because I read both of them like last week and I can. Okay. And that country has zero clinical studies on puberty blockers right now. So basically, you cannot get puberty blockers in that country, which is very, very good. I really hope that that's kind of the direction that the UK goes in based on this. Um, I think the political and social situation in the UK is such that that's very, very unlikely, but we'll see. Okay, yeah, it's in Sweden. Yeah, okay. Okay. Then, excellently, the report talks about the conceptual understanding of gender dysphoria, i.e., it mentions that some criteria for dysphoria may be seen as outdated by some people. Then she's like the stereotypes with like question marks and exclamation marks. It recognizes clinicians disagree about gender incongruence, whether it's inherent or immutable, and if transition is the best option. The report recognizes young people presenting to the service now have more complex needs than are many are neurodiverse and or have mental health needs, and additionally, they're mostly female and dysphoric at or from adolescence. Yeah. So the where's Radical Rumblings? I don't know. Maybe she had to go to work. Like if she's awake this early, maybe she's just like waking up to go to work and like having to like, shower and eat breakfast and crap. Um in a rather insightful moment among many, it says that while the service staff have their patients' best interest at heart, money isn't going to be the only thing needed to fix all this. There are staff issues, training, retention, recruitment, and cultural issues to address. Yeah, because don't feel bad, Radical. It's all good. Um, like Dragon, you're not always in my streams. A lot of the women in my streams are literally like I'm cooking dinner, or like I'm in the bath, or like I'm weeding my garden while I listen to you. So they'll check in like once, and then we won't hear from them because they're doing something. uh, I try and have like very chill vibes on my channel. Yes. So this the cultural issue. So you will hear like the whistleblowers from the Tavistock are a great example of this. They were like, I had like a child who I thought like there's like parental abuse going on, and there was one of them that says now that I look back, I think that there was like a sexual abuse aspect in the family for that kid, something along those lines. Um, it's in the Times article that I read on my channel like 2 years ago. And they are basically like within like the culture of the gender clinic, talking to the other clinicians or the admin or whoever, this is not an acceptable thing to be saying. Nobody's so because you can't even say it, nothing can be done about it, obviously. Um, or like, I know that at Central Toronto Youth Services, which is like, it's right outside the subway station that's in the gay village of Toronto. Like, it's literally across the street from the subway station. And it's like, you will get referred there if you are having like family problems, like your social worker at your high school or whatever, or the guidance counselor at your school, something like this, can refer you there. You need some counseling. It's free. It's from the government. You need some counseling. You go there, right? There is so many social workers doing their like I don't know what you call it, like a placement or something. Like after you're done school, you need to do like in the field experience before you're like officially a social worker. A lot of them do their work experience there. And I have talked to one woman who was there, and because she was like, I went there when I was a teenager, and now I'm doing a work placement there, right? And she was like, the culture has changed so much. It used to be like when I went there, practicum. Thank you, Radical. When they're doing the practicum, she's like, when I was there was like different departments. There was like a family department. There was like a gender and sexuality department. There was like anxiety and like self awareness, whatever. There was like different like things going on, right? Depending on what your issues were. She was like, now there is no departments. Every single person who works there is gender affirming, and like that's their like main focus. So you might get sent there because of like family issues, right? For example. And of course they will do like the family therapy with you. But like all of them are like brainwashed basically is what I'm saying. And so like culturally, she said that here there used to be an old lesbian who worked there, and like older, like in her 60s. So like a very different generation from the rest of the people who worked there. Mostly women obviously. And that she was kind of pushing back a little bit sometimes, like this kid maybe just doesn't know their sexuality yet, or like a lot of kids have gender confusion, like doesn't mean we should affirm that this kid specifically. She wasn't even saying like this is a bad approach. She would be like with specific kids, she would try to ask some questions, and basically like they were so hostile to her that she like took early retirement or something because like she couldn't be there. So like the culture aspect I think is huge. Hello, a bird killed me. Just so you know, I'm only here for like another 10 minutes because I need to go to work. Okay. Meanwhile, primary and secondary care staff have said they feel under pressure to, quote, adopt an unquestioning affirmative approach, that this is at odds with the standard process of clinical assessment and diagnosis that they've been trained to undertake in all other medical encounters, end quote. Yes. For example, taking fucking blood work to see what the hormone levels are before you start pumping someone full of hormones to see what you've actually fucking done to their body. This is like a very basic information. And how many I personally know Canadians who went to the doctor and were given hormones and went home to take their hormones with no blood work initially. So the doctor won't even know what the fuck is going on in their body. They don't have a before picture. Anyway, you treat them on like any other medical patients. Okay. Yeah, I know it's really that's another big part of the problem is people are like, once the detransitioners sue, everything will change. And I'm like, but how will everything change when we have like a generation of like social workers, guidance counselors, teachers, doctors who've all been brainwashed by this shit. They're not just all gonna like be like, oh yeah, I'll just forget about everything I learned the last like decade of this crap. Right? Okay. This is what's happening, Dragon. The doctors and therapists who know what's going on and who do give a shit don't want to get involved. They view it as like, well, as long as I'm not prescribing hormones and I'm not affirming, I'm not part of the problem. So there are doctors who know and don't and care. But what they'll do is like if they get a patient who says like I'm feeling trans feelings or whatever, they will refer them to another professional because they don't want to deal with it, you know? Okay. Quote, another significant issue raised with us is one of diagnostic overshadowing. This is what I was trying to talk about before, okay? The report points out that many of the children and young people have complex needs, but once they're identified as having gender related distress, other important issues can be overlooked. Um, no, Dragon, I'm just saying I've talked to Specifically, I've talked to one psychiatrist who teaches at a medical school in Canada, and he's like, "I don't want to deal with this. When if I ever have a patient who has gender feelings, I will immediately refer him to another psychiatrist or her." He's only had it like once with a Tim because he's like, "I will not. I'm not going to play into their shit. I'm not going to like affirm their delusion. I'm a fucking psychiatrist, right?" Um, and he specifically knows other doctors who have tried to like, give their patients actual fucking care, like other psychiatrists who have tried to like actually help their patient like critically approach like why do you feel this way? What's going on? And that one doctor he knows who did that got like faced like a lot of professional like backlash and like the culture of the place that he was working was very very against that. So I think there are doctors who care, but they're like basically too cowardly to actually do anything because they know that the cost of doing something is very high. Anyway, and so what happens is that the only people who talk about this are the affirmers. So then it looks like everybody is in agreement with the affirmation. When that's not the case, it's just those are the only people willing to talk because the social climate for anybody else to talk is really hostile. At least that's like the where I'm at now. Okay, right. So overshadowing, that is the word they used. In a politely damning look at service standards, the report highlights safeguarding issues, lack of standardized approach, and an affirmation on exploratory approach holding sway and scant evidence of proper mental health assessment. Society's collapsing. I agree. Okay. Um Now this is like a screen cap from the assessment. I think this is going to I mean the interim report. I think this is going to be the last thing I read before I sign off. Give me a second to like have a bite of food and read this before I like. I went to Subway last night to get my dinner and breakfast and you should the guy actually I was like, light lettuce, light pickles, onions, and I was like, I need a lot of olives, like handfuls of olives. Um, oh, bye, Radical. Have a good day at work. Um, and he actually gave me like mountains of olives, so I was very happy with that. Okay. Service standards. There's like a whole paragraph. Paragraph ends. These are the areas which require consideration. Okay, point one. From the point of entry to JIDS, there appears to be predominantly an affirmative, non-exploratory approach, often driven by child and parent expectations and the extent of social transition that has developed due to the delay in service provisions. Exactly what I was saying before. If you get to the clinic and you already have a trans identity and you've already changed your name and you've already socially transitioned, they're like, okay, so you've already done all the shit that I was supposed to like help you with or explore with you or whatever the fuck. So you've already like skipped a bunch of the steps. Let's just give you the hormones now. This is what I'm fucking talking about. Okay. Oh, you only like the short lives? Yeah. Okay. Um from documentation provided to the MPRG, I don't know what that is. Maybe that's the whoever it is that's hosting the cast review or facilitating the cast review, I'm not quite sure. Um you should listen to Lisa Michelle and Radical Ramblings lives though cuz they're really short. They're always like an hour. And they don't really ramble about bullshit. They're like very on topic. Okay. Okay, so from the documentation provided to this MRPG, there does not appear to be a standardized approach to assessment or progression through the process, which leads to potential gaps in necessary evidence and a lack of clarity. Yes, it's the Wild West. You just give the patient what they want. It's not like, you know, I don't know. You don't need a feeding tube unless you're like so underweight that you're like fucking dying. There's a standard there. Okay. What are the criteria that require a feeding tube now? Like it's that level. I've made this analogy before. Affirmation medicine is literally like you go into the therapist and you're like, I'm anorexic, so I have trouble eating sometimes. And they're like, you know what? We shouldn't do any therapy for your eating disorder. You don't need any therapy. We'll just stick a feeding tube down you right now, and then you can never have to worry about it again. We'll just do the most radical thing possible from the get go and skip everything else, ignore everything else, and hopefully it'll get better. Um, that's basically what they do with gender medicine. You walk in and instead of being like, "Oh, why do you feel this way? Like, let's see if we can fix the your problems." They're like, "No, no, no. Let's start with the most radical treatment right away based on nothing." Okay, whatever. Um, from the documentation provided to MRPG, there does not appear to be okay, wait, no. We read that already. Okay. There is limited evidence of mental health or neurodevelopmental assessment being routinely documented or of a discipline of formal diagnostic or psychological formulation. Yes, this. Oh yeah, I was just saying that people should go watch your channel cuz your live streams are very like tight. Like they're not super long. So like, and yeah, you guys stay focused on your shit. Okay. So yes, if a kid comes in, like for me for example, a lot of the stuff that I read as like gender dysphoria and proof that I should transition was literally like signs of ADHD. Literally. Like actually that's what it was. But because my therapist was never like, let's go or like like anxiety. Like how are you supposed to know I'm having a panic attack because of dysphoria or I'm having a panic attack because I literally have like clinically diagnosed anxiety, which I did. Nobody was like, let's parse this out. Let's see what's going on. Let's get like a holistic diagnosis of like everything that's going on with you, like a holistic. They were just like what she's saying. You come in and you say, "Oh, I've already got a name and I've already socially transitioned. Give me the hormones." They're not going to be like, "But don't you have like all these other mental health issues that might be a factor?" They'll just be like, "Yep, give me the hormones." Okay. Um, on 44 submissions received by MPRG, 31% were not initially assured due to lack of safeguarding information. I don't really know exactly what this sentence is saying. I don't know what initially assured is referring to, specifically in this context. And in a number of cases, there were specific safeguarding concerns. There do not appear to be considered to be consistent processes in place to work with other agencies to identify children and young people and families who may be vulnerable, at risk, or require safeguarding. Yeah. Okay. And the very last point, appropriate clinical experts need to be involved in informing decision making. So to me, this is like really harsh. I think what the report is saying that all of the clinical experts that are currently involved in the decision making are not the appropriate ones because they are not like actually assessing the patients properly. Um anyway, okay, I need to go. I have to go to work. This was chill. Um as you know, or maybe you don't know, tonight I am streaming with Rachel at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which is 5:30 p.m. Pacific Time, which is I think 12:30 a.m. um 12:30 a.m. London time. So I assume the Europeans will not really be there, but you can go to my channel and click set reminder and then you'll know what's happening tonight. Rachel is cool. I'll watch. Yes, Rachel is fucking awesome. Okay. Thank you all for coming. Have a very lovely day at work or a lovely afternoon if you're in Europe or whatever it is. I'm so sorry, Julia. Um there's a stream in like 12 hours if you want to make it to that one. Okay. Bye.